I want to start it off by talking about education like I usually do for the last two episodes. In the 2 episodes ago, I spoke about education in reference to the different levels of public education state by state. I compared Democrat states and I compared Republican states. What I found very conclusive: Democrat states far supersede Republican states in terms of public education, and it's really not that close. So, Democrat states are better when it comes to public education. That's the first fact I found out. Second fact I found out is, what exactly does the Department of Education do? Now, before I go into that, I'm going to read you off this because there was a Republican introduced bill that officially wants to get rid of the Department of Education. The bill aims to redistribute federal programs to other existing departments, but the biggest change would be allocating the K-12 education money directly to the states via block grants. Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota introduced the Returning Education to Our States Act. So, it's funny that this bill was introduced, because when I was doing my research on what exactly is the job of the Department of Education, come to find out, not that much. A grand majority of how the curriculum is determined and the amount of funds that go to these schools is decided state by state. But there's this weird notion that the federal government and the Department of Education is the reason why these schools are doing poorly, when that's just not the case. The reason why these schools are doing poorly is purely because of the ineptitude of the states themselves. And I can pull out a Democrat state that's not doing well either, California. So, that's the second fact that I want to point out. Democrat states are doing better than Republican states. Fact 1. Fact 2. States have a grand majority of say on what goes on at the public education level for these schools, not the Department of Education. Fact 2. And the fact 3 that I wanted to look up is I wanted to compare and contrast education, public education more particularly, especially ones that are lower than higher education, so like college and so on. And I wanted to compare other countries to the America. And what exactly are they doing that is different? And I didn't go too deep into it, but I wanted to compare the people in charge of determining how the curriculum and education goes. So, the top 10 public education systems in the world. Number 1, Iceland. And like always, the links for the information that I'm gathering will be in the description of the YouTube channel. Hopefully it'll be a description of the podcast description, but that is limited in terms of the amount of characters, so I can't guarantee that. But I do have sources that you can look up on your own. So number 1 is Iceland. Number 2 is Germany, and these are determined based off the education index. You can look that up as well. Number 3, New Zealand. Number 4, Norway. Number 5, Denmark. Number 6, Finland. Number 7, Switzerland. Number 8, the United Kingdom. Number 9, Slovenia. And number 10, Australia. I do want to note that the United States of America is number 13th. So even though a lot of criticism has gone towards the United States way, overall, based off the education index, they are still considered number 13 overall. So what exactly are these countries doing? And I looked up a couple. It's really hard to compare the United States to other countries consistently because the United States is so much bigger than so many of these countries. So I will give you the information, but I do want you to contextualize the difference because I do think it's important to know how they're doing it and why they're able to do things that is different from how we're able to do things. So New Zealand is number 1. No, Iceland is number 1. And Iceland, the way they run their education system is that they have a Ministry of Education and Children, which is responsible for the implementation of legislation pertaining to all school levels, from pre-primary and compulsory education through upper secondary school. This includes the task of creating curriculum guides for pre-primary, compulsory, and upper secondary schools, issuing regulations, and planning educational reforms. So to put this in layman's terms, Iceland has a department in their government that decides the curriculum. So their national, federal government, not national, but federal government, decides education in their country, and they are number one. Again, I want to reiterate, the United States does not have a national curriculum system. It does not exist. It is state by state. Next, we got Germany. Now, Germany has it where their states actually play the primary role, and Germany's number two, with the federal government only playing a minor role in determining education. So relatively similar to ours. New Zealand, they also have a Ministry of Education that decides all these different things. Norway, very similar, they have a Ministry of Education. Denmark, a Ministry of Education. And these countries are much smaller, so it's really hard to determine if that is the answer, having a national standard. Comparing other countries with a little bit more influence, but probably still not as big, the United Kingdom has the Department of Education, the DfE, which is the government body responsible for setting the curriculum. So again, another country has a national standard for their curriculum. And then Australia, who's number 10, only 3 spots above the United States of America, has something called the Australian curriculum. And it's kind of interesting. The Australian curriculum guides what students learn in school, state, territory, and non-government education authorities are responsible for delivering this. So to kind of put that together, because I didn't stop and break, periods are there and I just kept on rambling. Australian curriculum is the one that guides and decides the curriculum for the entire country. However, in order for this kind of national standard to exist, all these states, territory, and non-governmental educational authorities come together to come to a consensus. I would be very curious to see if that would be something that we would be able to find out or figure out or add towards our education system. Because if we go based on the idea that states should have complete autonomy, states like Mississippi will still suck at education, so will Texas, so will Montana. This won't change. Matter of fact, they will get dumber. The only thing that may change is them adding religion to school, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit later. So coming together as a collective to decide on these standards, I think is very much warranted. I mean, it plays into the whole idea of a democratic republic, right? I am for it. I like the idea, and we could do something like that for our huge country as of right now. So, the third fact that I kind of laid out for you, and the reason why I said on this, to put it very generally, is that other countries have different ways they do education. The countries that are better at education than us, based off the education index, most of them are smaller countries, fair, but also have a national standard and national curriculum that is decided upon for the students. They, other than Germany, for the top 10, are countries that are very much different from how the United States of America implements its education system. Now, the fact that we're still 13 is still pretty impressive, but we are highly carried by the Democrat states. So let's put the full picture into context, and let's put the full picture out here for you guys so you guys understand where I'm coming from after I did my due diligence, after I did my research. As of right now, the Department of Education is getting blamed for everything that is wrong with current public education, and you're told that by Donald Trump and his MAGA followers. But the reality is way more intricate and will shock you. The reality is the Department of Education has very little to do with the curriculum and the funding. Most of it, I would say 80% of the funding, is decided at the state level. And the curriculum, there's no national curriculum standard. It is completely decided at the state level. So the reason why Democrat states are doing so much better than Republican states in public education is because of your Republican standards. That is it. And when you compare the United States of America and what it does compared to some of the other countries that are doing far better based off the education index, a lot of them have national standards. A lot of them have a department in their federal government that helps decide the best way to go about education. The United States of America doesn't. Despite that, we are still 13th in public education. But you know what is really bringing us down is not the Department of Education, but Republican education and Republican states are why we are doing so bad. It's unfortunate to hear, MAGA, but this is just the truth. Sorry. Now, if states get full autonomy, this may get worse. And I'm curious to see. Maybe you could argue that the Republicans just have a different way of doing things. That if they bring certain standards into schools to help teach these Republicans, it may be better. That's a take, a very viable take, but another take that could be said is that if states have complete autonomy, Democrat states will be far better educated than Republican states. So we'll see what actually takes place, because they put a bill into place saying blaming the Department of Education, but the reality says otherwise.